The call came in just after sunrise, when the mist still clung to the low fields and the creek behind the old mill ran fast and loud from the night's rain. Ryan tightened Rook's harness, expecting a straight-line track along the ridge trails. The missing man had been out here before, easy terrain, clear paths, nothing unusual. But Rook didn't care about the ridge. The moment Ryan unclipped the safety lead, the dog surged forward, nose to the wind, dragging him down a steep embankment toward the low roar of water. "Rook, heel!" Ryan called, planting his boots in the mud. The dog didn't slow. His muscles coiled with urgency, the leash cutting into Ryan's palm. And that's when Ryan heard it, faint, almost lost under the sound of the creek. A whisper. "Don't leave me here." Ryan didn't question Rook's instincts often. In 3 years of working together, the full black K9 had led him to missing kids, injured hikers, and once even a man who'd fallen through thin ice. The dog had a sense for urgency, for danger, that Ryan had learned to trust. But this morning, the pull in Rook's movements was sharper than usual, almost frantic. "Easy, boy," Ryan muttered, more for himself than for the dog. His boots slid a half-step in the wet leaves as they left the main trail, following a narrow path between twisted maples. The air was heavy with the smell of wet soil and the sharp, metallic tang of the swollen creek. The whisper still echoed in his head. "Don't leave me here." He scanned the undergrowth, half expecting to see someone crouched nearby. Nothing. Only the trees shifting slightly in the breeze and the long shadows cast by the low morning sun. Rook's pace quickened as they broke from the trees onto the muddy slope leading to the creek. The water surged below, a churning ribbon of brown and white, swollen from last night's rainfall. Branches and debris spun in the current, colliding with muffled thuds against the rocks. Ryan steadied himself at the bank's edge, scanning both sides of the creek. He cupped a hand to his mouth. "Hello? Search team. Call out." For a long moment, only the rush of water answered. Then, so faint he almost thought it was the wind, came the voice again. "Don't leave me." It was coming from across the creek. Ryan's eyes swept the opposite bank. The brush was dense, tangled with thorn and fallen branches, but between the gaps he caught a flash of movement, a pale shape low to the ground. Rook barked once, sharp and direct, then whined, tugging toward the water. "Hold it," Ryan said, keeping the leash tight. The creek wasn't deep, but the current could knock a grown man off his feet. He needed another way across. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Hale. I've got possible visual across Miller Creek, east of the mill path. Advise team to shift to my position, over." Static crackled, then the reply, "Copy, Hale. Team 2 rerouting. ETA 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Ryan's gaze flicked back to the opposite bank. The shape was still there, barely moving. Rook paced at the edge, his front paws leaving deep prints in the mud. "You're not making this easy," Ryan muttered, scanning upstream for a crossing. A cluster of rocks jutted from the water 20 yards away, partially submerged but spaced close enough for someone nimble, or desperate, to leap across. He gave Rook the signal to follow, and they moved quickly along the bank. The dog stayed at his side only because the path was too narrow to pass. As they neared the rock crossing, Ryan glanced back toward the pale figure. It had shifted, no longer lying flat, but propped on one elbow, head tilted as if listening. Ryan's pulse ticked up. "Hang on. We're coming." The figure didn't respond. Rook was the first to test the rocks, leaping to the largest one with practiced ease. Ryan followed, balancing carefully as the water surged around his boots. 2 rocks in, the spray dampened his pant legs, the cold biting through the fabric. Halfway across, he glanced up. The figure was gone. He froze, scanning the opposite bank. The undergrowth was still, no sign of movement. Where? A sharp crack split the air, a branch snapping somewhere ahead. Rook's head jerked toward the sound, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Ryan moved faster, hopping to the last rock and stepping onto the opposite bank. The mud here was darker, wetter, his boots sinking nearly an inch with each step. The snapped branch lay ahead, a fresh break on a low alder limb. Beyond it, the ground sloped gently upward, the undergrowth thinning. Rook pulled him forward, nose low, tail stiff. Ryan followed, scanning left and right, his ears straining for any sound beyond the creek's roar behind them. That's when he saw it, not the missing hiker, but something else entirely. Half hidden in the weeds was a worn canvas backpack, the kind with leather straps and frayed edges. It was soaked through, one strap twisted, the flap half open. Inside, he could see a folded jacket and a small metal tin. He crouched, glancing around before reaching in. The jacket was lightweight, suited for spring hiking, and on the inside collar, someone had written a name in black marker, James Holloway. The missing man. Got something, Ryan murmured into his radio. Belongings located across the creek, north bank. Still no sign of subject. As he spoke, Rook stiffened beside him, his head swiveling toward the slope above. A shadow passed between the trees, too quick to catch details, but large enough to be human. Ryan stood, eyes locked on the movement. "Hey! Stop!" No answer. The shadow was gone. Rook barked, lunging toward the slope, and Ryan let him lead. The incline was slick, mud giving way under their boots and paws. At the top, the terrain leveled into a narrow strip of open ground before the forest thickened again. And there, standing at the edge of the trees, was a man. He was tall, with mud on his face and clothes, his posture hunched. For a moment, Ryan thought it was James Holloway, until the man lifted his head, and Ryan saw the eyes. Cold. Measuring. The man took a single step back into the shadows. Rook barked again, but Ryan didn't follow. Something in the man's gaze told him this wasn't the person they'd come for. And then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, that same whisper floated back. "Don't leave me here." Ryan stood frozen for a heartbeat, the sound of the whisper still curling through the trees. It hadn't been the wind, the rhythm was too deliberate, too human. He keyed the radio, keeping his voice low. "Hale to dispatch, I have visual on an unknown male, not confirmed as Holloway. Suspect is mobile, heading deeper into the woods, north bank of Miller Creek. Also have possible second party further in, requesting backup to converge from east access. Static, then, copy, Hale. Units rerouting. Estimated arrival, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That felt like an hour out here." Rook was still locked on the treeline, muscles coiled. Ryan gave the hand signal to track, and the K9 surged forward, pulling him toward the strip of open ground where the man had stood. The mud bore a fresh boot print, larger than average, deep enough to suggest someone moving fast. The toes pointed straight into the forest. They crossed into the shade, the morning light dimming behind them. The air here was cooler, damper, with the smell of moss and wet leaves thick around them. Ryan kept his flashlight low, more to spot prints than to illuminate their path. The boot tracks were easy to follow for the first 50 yards, then disappeared into a bed of pine needles. Rook didn't hesitate, his nose dropped, and he pulled left, weaving between trees. That's when Ryan heard it again, closer this time. "Don't leave." It was coming from ahead and slightly to the right. Rook's pace increased, his nails clicking softly against occasional stones. Ryan ducked under a low-hanging branch, his eyes scanning for movement. Every part of him was alert, the whisper was too clear, too deliberate, and yet carried a strain that made it sound like someone fading. They broke into a small clearing, the ground uneven and littered with old storm debris. In the center was a tangle of fallen branches forming a crude lean-to against a stump. The structure looked recent, the ends of the branches freshly snapped. Rook pulled toward it, growling low. Ryan swept his flashlight over the pile and froze. A shoe. Just the tip of it, sticking out from beneath the branches. "Hold, Rook," Ryan ordered, moving forward cautiously. He crouched and pulled a branch aside, revealing a man curled on his side, his face pale under a layer of dirt. His clothes were soaked, the jacket torn at the sleeve. "James Holloway?" Ryan asked quickly. The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they locked on Ryan's, and his lips moved. "Don't leave me." Ryan leaned closer. "You're safe now. We're getting you out." Holloway's hand gripped Ryan's sleeve weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's still here." A rustle in the trees snapped Ryan's head up. Rook growled, his body angling toward the sound. Ryan scanned the tree-line but saw nothing. He turned back to Holloway. "Who's still here?" But Holloway's eyes had rolled closed again, his grip loosening. Ryan switched to the radio. "Subject located, conscious but weak. Possible threat in vicinity. Need medevac to my position, fast. Copy, Hale. Team moving to you. ETA 5 minutes. 5 minutes felt like a dangerous gap. Ryan glanced at Rook, then at the trees. He didn't like the idea of standing still. "We're moving," he muttered. He eased Holloway into a seated position, looping the man's arm over his shoulders. The hiker was lighter than expected, but his unsteady legs made every step awkward. Rook stayed slightly ahead, nose sweeping side to side, checking the path. They'd made it halfway to the creek when the first sign of pursuit came, a distinct crack of a branch snapping behind them, not far back. Ryan didn't turn, instead, he adjusted his pace, pushing forward faster. "Rook, cover," he ordered. The dog shifted to take a wider arc, watching their flank. Another sound followed, not the crack of a branch this time, but a soft, deliberate footfall. Someone was pacing them, keeping just enough distance to stay unseen. They reached the bank, but the rock crossing now seemed like a trap, too exposed, too slow. Ryan scanned downstream and saw a narrower section where the water thinned over a bed of gravel. Risky, but faster. "Hang on," he told Holloway, then nodded to Rook. "Go." The K-9 stepped into the shallows first, the water surging around his legs. Ryan followed, supporting Holloway with both hands. The current tugged hard at his boots, sending cold water spilling into them, but the footing was solid enough to cross. They reached the opposite bank and scrambled up onto higher ground. Rook immediately turned back toward the creek, hackles raised, growling deep in his chest. Ryan turned too, and there, on the far bank, stood the man from before. Same cold eyes. Same stillness. He didn't move toward them. He just stood there, watching. Then, with a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes, he stepped back into the trees and was gone. The creek's noise faded as Ryan pushed Holloway up the last rise to the main trail. His breathing was heavy, both from the climb and from the awareness that the man across the water hadn't just stumbled on them, he'd been waiting. Watching. "Almost there," Ryan said, glancing at Holloway, whose eyes remained half-lidded, his weight sagging more with each step. Rook led ahead, ears pricked, nose twitching in quick bursts as he scanned the air. The trailhead was less than 200 yards away now, and Ryan could already make out the faint glint of sunlight on the windshields of the waiting vehicles. He keyed the radio. "Hale to command, I've got Holloway and we're inbound to the trailhead. Advise medics to be ready." "Copy that, Hale," came the reply. They rounded a bend, the path widening, and Ryan's eyes narrowed. Something was in the middle of the trail up ahead, an object that hadn't been there when they'd first come through. Rook stopped abruptly, body stiffening. A low growl vibrated from his chest. Ryan eased Holloway against a tree trunk and stepped forward cautiously, hand hovering near his sidearm. The object was a small wooden box, no bigger than a lunch pail, sitting neatly in the center of the path. It looked handmade, rough-hewn planks bound together with thin wire. A strip of cloth, tied in a tight knot, hung from one corner. Ryan's gut tightened. He'd seen the cloth before. The same material had been tied to branches in gear and other missing person cases, always just far enough from the scene to suggest someone wanted it found. He crouched, studying it without touching. Rook moved closer, sniffing the air above the box, then recoiled slightly, ears flattening. "Something's off," Ryan murmured. He looked back at Holloway, who was watching the box with a look of dread, his lips moving soundlessly. Ryan called over his shoulder, "James, what is it?" Holloway's voice came out as a rasp. "His sign." The underbrush to their left rustled faintly. Ryan's head snapped toward the sound, but he saw nothing, just dense foliage shifting in the wind. He reached for his radio. "Hale to all units, I've got an object on the main trail, possible evidence. Suspect may be in vicinity. Approach with caution." Before he could say more, another voice crackled through. "Hale, this is Team 2. We're 30 seconds out from your position. Hold tight." Ryan stood, backing slowly toward Holloway. "We're moving back toward the trailhead," he said, keeping his eyes on the box. Rook's growl deepened. The dog's gaze was fixed on the underbrush, not the box. Whatever was out there was still moving. Ryan pulled Holloway along, his pace quick but steady. The sound of approaching boots from Team 2 gave him some relief, but not enough to shake the feeling that they were being shadowed. When the other officers appeared around the bend, Ryan quickly waved them forward. "Secure him," he said, nodding to Holloway, "and get that box to evidence without opening it here." One of the officers took Holloway's weight while another carefully bagged the box. Ryan kept scanning the tree line until they were all moving again. The last stretch to the trailhead felt longer than it should have. Ryan's boots hit the gravel parking area and the sight of the waiting medic unit was a small victory. They got Holloway onto a stretcher, medics immediately checking his vitals. He murmured something to one of them, too low for Ryan to hear, and then closed his eyes. Ryan turned back toward the trail. Rook was still standing at its entrance, watching the trees. His posture was rigid, his focus unbroken. "What is it, boy?" Ryan asked quietly. Rook didn't look back, only shifted slightly, his gaze tracking movement that Ryan couldn't see. One of the medics called him over. "He's dehydrated, mild hypothermia. Stable for transport, but we'll keep him under observation." Ryan nodded, but his mind wasn't on Holloway's vitals. It was on the fact that the man they'd seen hadn't tried to stop them, he'd let them leave. And he'd left something behind. The box was already sealed in an evidence bag, but Ryan found himself glancing toward the transport SUV where it sat on the seat. The strip of cloth hung limply against the plastic, swaying slightly with the breeze. He didn't know what was inside. But he knew it was meant for them to see, and maybe, later, to open. As the vehicles pulled out, Ryan loaded Rook into his unit, the dog still staring at the trees as if expecting something to follow. And then, just as Ryan shut his door, his radio crackled again. "Hale, this is dispatch. We just got a call from a woman near Miller Creek Road. Says she heard a man outside her property whispering, quote, 'Don't leave me here.' Caller says she looked outside, and no one was there." Ryan started the engine, his jaw tightening. "Send me the address." The address from dispatch wasn't far, maybe a mile and a half from the trailhead, but it was down an unpaved lane that wound through dense timber. Ryan's tires crunched over gravel and wet leaves as he approached, the sound oddly muffled beneath the overhanging branches. The property came into view suddenly, like it had been hidden until the last moment. A weathered, two-story house sat back from the lane, its paint peeling in long strips. A small barn leaned slightly to one side, and the yard was littered with old farm equipment that hadn't been touched in years. Rook stood at the rear window of the unit, nose pressed to the glass, his breath fogging it. Ryan parked, stepping out into the heavy silence. The air here felt different, still, like the forest itself was holding its breath. A woman in her 50s emerged from the porch. She wore a thick cardigan despite the mild weather, her eyes darting past Ryan toward the tree line before settling on him. "You the one they sent?" she asked, voice low. "Yes, ma'am." "Officer Hale," Ryan replied, holding up his badge. "You reported hearing someone on your property?" Her gaze flicked back to the trees again. "I didn't just hear him. I know he was here." Ryan took out his notebook. "Tell me exactly what happened." She nodded, wringing her hands. "It was maybe half an hour ago. I was in the kitchen, window open a crack, and I heard it, this whisper, like someone right under the sill. Said, 'Don't leave me here.' I went to the porch, called out, but all I saw was movement, back toward the woods." "But," her voice faltered. "But what?" Ryan pressed gently. Her eyes met his, wide and unblinking. The voice, it didn't sound like it came from a man standing outside. It sounded close. Like it was right in my ear. Ryan's grip tightened on his pen. "Did you recognize the voice?" "No. But it was the same thing you just said on the news, that missing man out by Miller Creek. That's what you're looking for, isn't it?" Ryan exhaled slowly. "We found him. He's safe. But I need to check your property." The woman nodded quickly. "Take the dog. Go wherever you need." Ryan returned to the unit and released Rook. The K9 hit the ground running, nose down, tail rigid. They started at the porch, and within seconds Rook's head snapped toward the left side of the house. Ryan followed as the dog led them to a patch of bare earth near the foundation. The soil was freshly disturbed, as if something had been set down and moved again. "Track," Ryan ordered. Rook took off toward the treeline, weaving between the rusted remains of farm machinery. The ground dipped slightly before rising into a wall of undergrowth. Ryan pushed through, his jacket snagging on thorny vines. Just inside the tree line, Rook stopped abruptly. Ryan stepped up beside him, and saw it. A single boot print. Deep. Crisp. Facing toward the house. But there was something else, a long, thin strip of cloth tied to a low branch, fluttering in the faint breeze. The same kind of cloth from the box on the trail. Ryan crouched, studying the print. It was large, matching the one he'd seen earlier near the shadowy figure. Whoever this was, they'd been close enough to the house to see inside. Rook's ears flicked forward, and a low growl built in his chest. Ryan rose slowly, scanning the surrounding trees. The forest was quiet, but not in the peaceful way, more in the way of an animal pausing before striking. He keyed his radio. "Hale to dispatch, confirm Team 2 is still with Holloway?" "Affirmative," came the reply. "Subject is en route to County Medical." "Why?" "Possible suspect sighting near witness property." "Same indicators as earlier location." There was a pause before dispatch answered again. "Do you require backup?" Ryan's eyes tracked the shadows between the trees. "Affirmative." "And have them approach silent." As he waited, Rook shifted his weight, staring into the woods. Ryan followed the dog's gaze and caught a flicker of movement, a shadow sliding between tree trunks. "Police!" Ryan called. "Show yourself." No answer. The movement stopped, but Ryan could feel eyes on him. He kept his stance steady, one hand resting on his sidearm, the other holding Rook's lead short. For nearly 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, from deeper in the woods, the voice came again. "Don't leave." Only this time, it was louder, and it didn't sound like Holloway. Ryan's jaw tightened. "We're not leaving," he muttered under his breath. "Not until I know what you want." But by the time backup arrived, the forest was empty again. The backup team fanned out quickly, two officers sweeping the barn while another moved along the house's perimeter. Ryan stayed at the treeline with Rook, scanning for any sign of the figure he'd glimpsed. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. Even the usual chatter of birds seemed absent. "Anything?" one of the officers called from the barn. "Clear," came the reply. Ryan didn't like it. If the suspect had been here moments ago, they hadn't gone far. He was about to signal for a deeper sweep when Rook stiffened, his ears rotating slightly to the right. Ryan turned his head. That's when he heard it, the whisper again. "Don't leave me here." It came from maybe 20 yards in, to the right of where they stood. "Got something," Ryan said into the radio. Voices in the woods, moving to investigate. But before he could take a step, another voice, the same phrase, came from the opposite direction. Ryan froze. His brain registered the impossibility before his body reacted. Two identical voices, one from the east, one from the west, speaking the exact same words in perfect unison. Rook's head snapped back and forth between the sounds, his growl deepening. Ryan keyed his mic again. "Be advised, possible accomplice or recording. Multiple sources of identical audio. Proceed with extreme caution." The nearest officer moved toward the western sound, while Ryan and Rook cut east. The undergrowth was thick here, but Rook pushed through with purpose, nose low, tail rigid. They came to a small clearing, no more than 10 feet across, with a rotting log lying in the center. The ground was soft and churned up, like someone had been pacing in place. Rook circled the area, sniffing, then stopped abruptly, pawing at a spot near the base of the log. Ryan knelt. Half buried in the damp earth was a small portable speaker, the kind you could clip to a belt. Its casing was scratched, and the battery light flickered dimly. He picked it up carefully, brushing away dirt. The speaker was still on, but silent now, as if whoever controlled it had cut the feed. A deliberate distraction. Ryan stood, scanning the surrounding trees. If someone had planted the speaker here, it meant they'd wanted to pull attention in this direction. Which meant the real action could be happening back toward the house. He broke into a run, Rook keeping pace effortlessly. They burst out of the treeline just as the woman from the porch shouted, "Hey! Over here!" Ryan sprinted toward her, the other officer from the barn converging from the side. The woman pointed toward the far edge of the yard. "He was standing right there," she said, voice shaking. "Just watching me." Ryan didn't waste time with questions. He signaled to Rook, who immediately locked onto the direction she'd indicated. They moved quickly toward a rusted tractor half buried in weeds. Beyond it, a narrow footpath led deeper into the woods. Fresh boot prints marked the damp soil. Ryan keyed his radio, "We've got a trail." "Rook's tracking." The K9 pulled hard, his stride lengthening. The path twisted through dense brush, and Ryan kept his focus tight, listening for anything ahead, movement, breathing, even the rustle of fabric. But after 50 yards, the prints veered sharply off the path and into a section of ground so overgrown it was nearly impassable. Ryan pushed through, branches clawing at his sleeves. They emerged into a small hollow surrounded by moss-covered boulders. In the center, sitting upright against one of the rocks, was another box. It was identical to the one from the trail, same rough wood, same thin wire holding it together, same strip of cloth tied at the corner. Ryan approached slowly. The air here felt wrong, heavier, as if the hollow held onto the dampness longer than it should. Rook stood to one side, watching the trees, his posture alert but not aggressive. Ryan crouched, studying the box without touching it. His eyes caught faint lettering burned into the top, not neat, but deliberate. "You took him." Ryan's pulse kicked up. He keyed the radio. Found another box, same construction. Inscribed with a message. "Possible direct threat. Copy, Hale. Do you want it collected now?" Ryan shook his head even though no one could see him. Negative. I want photos in place before we move it. Suspect may be watching. As if on cue, a faint rustle came from the boulders above. Ryan's eyes snapped up, but whatever had moved was gone before he could get a clear look. He stayed crouched for a moment longer, scanning the surrounding rock faces. The hollow was a perfect vantage point for someone to watch without being seen. Finally, he stood. Let's move. We're not sitting in this pocket. Rook led the way back toward the property, the officers falling in behind them. Ryan glanced over his shoulder once, just before the hollow disappeared from view. For a split second, he thought he saw a figure standing between the boulders. Tall. Still. Watching. And then it was gone. Back at the farmhouse, Ryan laid both boxes on the hood of his unit. The first from the trail was still sealed in its evidence bag, the strip of cloth pressed against the plastic. The second sat bare, the words "you took him" burned into the lid like a brand. 2 boxes, left in 2 different places, within hours of each other. Too deliberate to be coincidence. The woman from the farmhouse stayed near the porch, clutching a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. She kept glancing toward the woods as if expecting someone to emerge. Rook paced in a tight line between the 2 boxes, sniffing each in turn. His ears twitched back and forth, as if he was catching something distant, a sound too faint for Ryan to hear. One of the backup officers approached. "We've canvassed 100 yards in every direction. No fresh prints except the ones you found. Whoever it is, they're good at losing a trail." Ryan nodded, his eyes still on the burned message. "This wasn't random. He wants me to see this." "You think it's personal?" the officer asked. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Feels that way." He reached for his phone and pulled up the crime scene photos from earlier missing person cases in the county. The knot in his stomach tightened. 2 years ago, a similar box had been found in a different search, same rough construction, same cloth, but the message then had read, "Bring her back." That case had ended cold. No suspect, no body. Rook's nails clicked against the hood as he leaned closer to the second box, nostrils flaring. Then he froze, head snapping toward the far tree line. Ryan followed his gaze. The tree shadows were deep, the movement subtle, just enough to make out the faint sway of a low branch. He grabbed the radio. "All units, possible suspect sighting, eastern tree line. Lock perimeter." But before any confirmation came, the whisper cut through the air again. "Don't leave me here." Only this time, it was unmistakably closer. Ryan's hand went to his sidearm as he stepped away from the unit, Rook falling into stride beside him. They moved toward the source, weaving past the rusted farm equipment and into the start of the woods. The whisper came again, softer now. Almost pleading. They reached a patch of ground littered with old leaves, the soil beneath disturbed in a way that made Ryan stop cold. It wasn't a boot print. It was the outline of a small hand. He crouched, brushing the leaves aside carefully. The impression was deep, as if someone had pressed their hand into the earth and held it there. Rook began to whine, not from fear, but from impatience, like he wanted to move now. "Track," Ryan ordered. The dog bolted forward, pulling hard enough to make Ryan stumble. They cut deeper into the woods, the light dimming as branches closed overhead. The air here smelled different, sharper, almost metallic. After 50 yards, Rook stopped so abruptly that Ryan nearly tripped over him. The dog stood rigid, staring straight ahead. Ryan followed his line of sight, and his stomach turned. Hanging from a low branch at chest height was a third strip of cloth, but this one was knotted into a loop. Beneath it, on the ground, sat a folded piece of paper weighed down by a flat stone. Ryan slipped on a glove and picked it up. The paper was yellowed, edges frayed. Inside, written in jagged block letters, were 4 words. "He doesn't like waiting." Ryan's pulse quickened. He scanned the trees again, the hair on the back of his neck prickling. The message wasn't meant for Holloway. It was meant for him. He keyed his radio. Found written message. Threat is escalating. Advise all units to tighten perimeter and watch for concealed positions. Dispatch confirmed, but Ryan wasn't listening anymore. His attention was fixed on Rook, who hadn't moved, his eyes locked on something in the shadows. Ryan followed the gaze, and there, just beyond the nearest tree, was a silhouette. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Ryan stepped forward. Police. Stay where you are. The figure tilted its head slightly, then turned and melted into the forest without a sound. Rook lunged, but Ryan held the lead tight. Not yet, he muttered. We play this on our terms. When they returned to the farmhouse, the second box was gone. No one had seen who took it. Ryan stared at the empty space on the hood where the second box had been. The evidence bag holding the first was still there, undisturbed, but the bare wooden one with the burned words, "You took him," was gone. The backup officers looked uneasy. We were no more than 30 feet away, one of them said. We didn't hear or see a thing. Ryan's jaw tightened. Whoever was behind this had been bold enough to walk into an active search perimeter and remove an item from a police vehicle without being spotted. That wasn't desperation, that was confidence. Rook paced restlessly in a small circle, occasionally glancing toward the eastern tree line where the figure had been moments earlier. Ryan keyed his radio. Command, confirm all units still in perimeter positions. Confirmed, came the reply. We've had no movement reported. Yeah, Ryan muttered, because they're better at moving than we are at watching. He turned to the farmhouse owner. Ma'am, you should go inside and lock your doors. Stay away from the windows. She didn't argue, just nodded quickly and disappeared inside, the door clicking shut behind her. Ryan stepped over to the first box, still sealed. He studied it more closely, the rough saw cuts in the wood, the way the wire had been wrapped. Then he pulled up the crime scene photos from 2 years ago again. The knotwork on the cloth strips matched. The burn marks matched. Even the type of wood looked identical. Whoever this was had been doing it a long time, and they'd never been caught. He looked at the officers. We're tightening the search grid. No one leaves their sector without calling it in. And get a drone up over the east woods, he's using that cover to move between us. The officers moved to carry out the orders. Ryan leaned against the hood, thinking. The suspect's actions weren't random, they were targeted, and now he was escalating by taking things back. That meant there was an endgame. Rook gave a low whine, nudging Ryan's leg. The dog's nose tilted toward the ground, then to the tree line again. You've got something, don't you, boy? Ryan murmured. They started toward the east woods, moving slower this time, Ryan letting Rook choose the pace. The dog's head moved side to side, sampling the air, then dropped low to follow a scent trail invisible to human eyes. The trail cut through a thicket, the branches clawing at Ryan's sleeves, and opened into a narrow path worn just enough to suggest regular use. It sloped gently downhill, and the sound of running water grew louder. A creek. Rook pulled harder, eager now. They broke through the last of the brush to find the water moving quick and shallow over smooth stones. The banks were muddy, dotted with boot prints. Ryan crouched, studying the impressions. The treads matched the print near the farmhouse. But there were others, smaller, lighter, spaced in a way that suggested a child. Rook moved to a spot where the bank was undercut, the roots of a large tree jutting out over the water. He sniffed at something caught between two roots and then stepped back. It was a strip of cloth. Ryan's chest tightened. This one was different, darker, stained, frayed at both ends. He slipped it into an evidence bag and stood, scanning the opposite bank. That's when he saw the faint shape tucked against the base of a fallen log on the far side. Another box. No cloth this time. Just the box itself, sitting half in shadow. Ryan keyed his mic Hale to command, found another item, creekside. I'm crossing to secure it. He stepped into the cold water, the current pushing hard against his boots. Rook waited beside him, eyes locked on the object ahead. They reached the far bank, Ryan keeping low as he approached. The box was damp, its wood swollen from the moisture, but intact. Unlike the others, it had no wire bindings, and the lid was loose. That set his nerves on edge. The suspect had never left one open before. He slipped on a fresh glove and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of moss, was a small, folded piece of fabric, a child's mitten. Faded blue. Next to it was a Polaroid photograph, edges curled. Ryan turned it over. The image was grainy, but clear enough, the farmhouse they'd just left, as seen from the treeline. In the foreground, through the window, the woman stood holding her coffee mug. It had been taken today. Ryan's pulse quickened. He slipped the mitten and photo into an evidence bag and looked up at the treeline beyond the creek. Rook's growl started low and rose, his body shifting into a defensive stance. Ryan followed his gaze, and there, between two trees, was the silhouette again. It didn't move this time. It just stood there. Ryan took one step forward. You've got something to say, you say it to me, he shouted. The figure tilted its head, the same slow, deliberate motion as before, then turned and vanished into the shadows. Ryan keyed the mic suspect sighting. East bank of creek. Moving north. I need units to cut him off. The reply came back tense. Hale, all units are accounted for. We've got no one near your position. Ryan looked down at Rook, whose hackles were still raised. Yeah, Ryan said quietly. That's the problem. Ryan stood at the creek's edge, the weight of the mitten and photograph heavy in his hands even through the plastic evidence bag. His mind was already turning over possibilities, the connection to the old case was too strong to ignore. He keyed his radio. Command, patch me through to missing persons archives. I need confirmation on an item from the Ellery Creek file, 2019. There was a short pause before the dispatcher replied. Stand by, Hale. Rook remained tense at his side, gaze still fixed on the treeline where the silhouette had been. Even now, Ryan half expected to see it reappear, just standing there, waiting. The voice on the radio returned. Hale, missing persons confirms, mitten matches description from case #19-076. Belonged to Emily Carter, age 7. Missing since December 14, 2019. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. He remembered the case. Emily Carter had disappeared from her own backyard one snowy afternoon. Her father had gone inside for just 5 minutes, and when he returned, she was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Just one mitten left in the snow near the fence. That mitten had never been found. Until now. Ryan looked down at Rook. We're in it now, boy. This isn't just about Holloway anymore. The creek gurgled quietly around them, the only sound in the stillness. Ryan scanned the far bank again. No movement. No sound. Whoever the figure was, they were gone, but he had the sinking feeling they weren't far. He keyed his mic again. Command, secure the farmhouse. Double the perimeter. If Emily Carter's mitten was here, this suspect's been working the area for years. Copy, Hale. What's your next move? Ryan looked north along the creek. The banks curved away into thicker forest, where the water ran darker and the canopy blocked most of the light. It was the perfect place for someone to vanish, or to wait. We're following the creek north. Send 2 units to intercept a half-mile ahead. Rook stepped into the water before Ryan even finished speaking, pulling at the lead with urgency. They moved along the bank, the mud sucking at Ryan's boots, the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves heavy in the air. Every so often, Rook would stop and sniff at the undergrowth, his body languid sharp, like he was mapping invisible markers. Halfway to the intercept point, Ryan spotted something snagged in a cluster of reeds at the water's edge. He crouched to pull it free, a torn corner of paper, slick with moisture. It was part of a photograph. The image was mostly ruined by water damage, but he could make out the edge of a child's shoe and what looked like a swing set in the background. He sealed it in an evidence bag without hesitation. Rook pulled again, leading them farther north. The creek narrowed here, the banks rising higher, forcing Ryan to climb and descend in quick succession. His legs burned from the effort, but he kept pace. Then, without warning, Rook stopped dead. His body lowered slightly, tail straight, head fixed ahead. Ryan followed his gaze and saw movement, quick, low to the ground, disappearing behind a large fallen tree just ahead. He raised his voice. "Police! Step out where I can see you." Silence. Rook's muscles bunched like he was ready to lunge. Ryan moved forward slowly, hand on his weapon, until he reached the fallen tree. He leaned over and froze. There, tucked into the hollow of the trunk, was another box. This one was different. Smaller. And inside, lying on a bed of pine needles, was a single plastic hair clip, bright yellow, shaped like a butterfly. Ryan recognized it instantly. It was in the same missing persons file as the mitten. Emily Carter had been wearing two of them the day she vanished. Rook growled low, ears pricked toward the forest beyond. Ryan didn't need to look to know they were being watched again. He keyed his mic quietly. "Command, suspects playing with evidence from 2019 case. This is targeted. I need a full team on this creek now." Before Command could respond, the voice came again, but this time, it wasn't the usual whisper. It was louder. Sharper. "You took her." The sound echoed off the creek walls, making it impossible to pinpoint the direction. Rook spun, trying to lock on, but the voice didn't repeat. Ryan's pulse hammered. Whoever this was, they were escalating faster now, testing how far he'd chase, how much he'd commit. He picked up the hair clip, sealed it in a bag, and looked at Rook. "We're not stopping." And they didn't. They pushed farther north, into a stretch of forest so dense the light faded to a greenish gloom, the creek's path twisting like it was trying to lose them. The game had changed, and Ryan knew it. The creek narrowed even further until Ryan and Rook were forced to walk in the water itself, boots slipping on slick stones. The banks rose sharply on both sides now, forming a natural channel hemmed in by moss-covered rock walls. The canopy overhead blocked most of the light, turning the water dark and the air cooler. Ryan's breath misted faintly in front of him, though it wasn't cold enough for frost. The temperature drop wasn't natural, it was the air funneling through the channel, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke. Rook's steps slowed, his nose tilting upward. He was catching it too. Ryan keyed his mic command. "We're in a narrow creek channel, maybe 20 yards south of the North Ridge. Smelling wood smoke. Could be a camp." "Copy, Hale," came the reply. "Backup is 5 minutes out from your last ping." 5 minutes could be a lifetime if the suspect was ahead of them. The channel curved to the left, and Ryan's pace slowed instinctively. His eyes swept the rock walls for ledges or alcoves where someone could hide. This was a choke point, perfect for an ambush. Rook suddenly stiffened, muscles coiling, gaze fixed around the bend. Ryan raised his voice. "Police! Show yourself." No reply. Only the sound of the creek rushing faster now, as if the water ahead was dropping over rocks. They rounded the bend, and froze. The creek spilled into a small basin surrounded on 3 sides by steep rock walls. The only exit was the way they'd come, unless you climbed, and those walls were slick with moss, nearly vertical. In the center of the basin, a thin column of smoke rose from a smoldering fire pit. Around it, crudely arranged stones marked the perimeter, and on the far side, tucked against the base of the wall, was a makeshift lean-to built from branches and a blue tarp. Rook's ears were forward, his body low, eyes scanning. Ryan moved closer, every step deliberate. The fire pit was still warm, someone had been here recently. A battered metal mug sat on one of the stones, steam still curling from its contents. He reached the lean-to and crouched, pulling the tarp aside. Inside, the ground was lined with an old sleeping bag, heavily worn. Beside it sat a small pile of items, a child's plastic bracelet, a cracked snow globe, a faded paperback book with its cover half torn away. Every item matched descriptions from old missing persons files. Ryan's throat tightened. This wasn't a random campsite. It was a collection, trophies. Rook's growl started low and built, his head swinging toward the rock wall on the far side. Ryan followed his gaze and saw it, a narrow crack between the stones, wide enough for a person to slip through. It disappeared into darkness. Before Ryan could move toward it, a voice echoed out from inside. "You shouldn't have come here alone." Ryan's grip on his weapon tightened. "Step out where I can see you." Silence. Then the faint sound of footsteps retreating into the darkness of the crack. Rook surged forward, but Ryan held him back. Charging into an unknown tunnel without backup would be suicide. He keyed his mic command, "I've located a probable hideout. Found items connected to multiple missing person cases. Suspect may be in an underground passage heading north from my position. I need immediate intercept." "Copy, Hale. Units are moving to your coordinates." Ryan kept his eyes on the crack, every instinct screaming that the suspect was still watching from inside. He could feel it, the weight of eyes in the dark. Then something slid out of the crack and landed at his feet. It was another Polaroid. Ryan picked it up, turning it over. The image was of him and Rook, taken less than 10 minutes ago, crossing the creek toward this basin. Rook's growl deepened, and Ryan slowly backed toward the basin's exit, keeping the crack in sight until the bend in the creek swallowed it from view. They didn't stop moving until the sound of boots on rocks signaled the arrival of backup. Even then, Ryan didn't relax. The suspect had known exactly where he'd be, and when. Which meant this wasn't just a hunt. It was a game. And Ryan had just stepped into the middle of it. Ryan didn't want to enter the crack in the rock wall without backup, but he knew the suspect was getting farther away with every passing second. The arrival of 2 additional officers at the basin gave him just enough cover to make the call. "You two hold here," he told them. "Secure this area, log everything, and don't let anyone near that crack until we're through." One of the officers frowned. "You're going in?" Ryan's tone left no room for argument. "I'm going in. He's using those tunnels to move unseen, and I'm not letting him slip out again." Rook stood at his side, every muscle ready, ears pricked toward the darkness. Ryan adjusted the flashlight clip to his vest and drew his sidearm. The beam cut a narrow path into the crevice, revealing rough stone walls slick with moisture. The space was just wide enough for him to sidestep through, his shoulders brushing rock. The smell changed almost immediately, damp earth mixed with something faintly metallic, like old blood. The sound of the creek faded until there was only the drip of water from somewhere deep ahead. Rook moved just in front, his pace slow, nose to the ground. Every so often he'd glance back, making sure Ryan was right behind him. The crack widened slightly, leading into a low-ceiling chamber. The beam of Ryan's flashlight swept over the walls, and froze. Dozens of photographs were tacked to the stone with rusted nails. Most were Polaroids. Faces of children, some smiling, some crying, all looking directly at the camera. Ryan's stomach turned. He recognized several from the missing persons database. At the center of the chamber was a wooden crate, lid ajar. Inside were more trophies, small items, a hairbrush, a toy car, a folded note with crayon scribbles. And on top of it all, a strip of cloth, knotted the same way as the ones left outside. Rook gave a low, uneasy whine, but his gaze was fixed on a narrow passageway at the far end of the chamber. Ryan moved toward it, stepping carefully over loose stones. The tunnel beyond sloped upward, the air fresher here. Faint light seeped through at the far end. They emerged behind a curtain of hanging roots into another clearing, this one higher up on the ridge, overlooking the basin they'd just left. From here, it was easy to see the creek's winding path and the entry point they'd used. And there, leaning casually against a tree less than 20 feet away, was the figure. Even at this distance, Ryan could see the outline of a hood pulled low over the face, hands shoved into pockets. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch at the sudden appearance of Ryan and Rook. Ryan raised his weapon. "Hands where I can see them." The figure tilted its head, the same slow, deliberate gesture as before, then turned and bolted into the trees. "Rook, track!" Ryan shouted. The K9 lunged forward, pulling Ryan hard toward the fleeing suspect. Branches snapped underfoot, the ground uneven with roots and rocks. Ryan's breath came fast, the flashlight bouncing wildly as they tore through the undergrowth. The suspect was fast, unnervingly fast, slipping between trees with practiced ease. But Rook was faster, closing the gap. They broke into a small ravine, and that's when Ryan saw it, another box, sitting dead center in the mud. The suspect didn't slow, didn't look back, just disappeared into the dense brush beyond. Ryan skidded to a stop at the box, Rook circling it once before sitting. This one was different from the others. It was painted black, the lid secured with two thin strips of red cloth. Ryan knelt and carefully untied them, lifting the lid. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, like someone had pressed too hard with the pen. "You can't save them all." Below the words was a crude drawing, a man and a dog, standing at the edge of a creek. Behind them, in the background, small stick figures stood in the trees, their faces just hollow circles. Ryan stared at it for a long moment, then slipped it into an evidence bag. Rook shifted beside him, eyes scanning the treeline as if still expecting the figure to appear again. Ryan keyed his mic command, "Suspect fled north from ridge above basin. We have multiple active crime scenes, confirmed evidence from old cases. Secure every exit point. He's not getting away again." The voice on the other end was steady but urgent. "Copy that. All units are moving to intercept." Ryan stood, his boots heavy with mud, and looked in the direction the suspect had vanished. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun.